The monkey is a wise animal. Well, of course, he also chose Castro. I'm entirely satisfied. Well done, Castro.
As you know, motorsport has always been dangerous, and that is not going to change. Just like in airplanes, speed, alongside with danger, is the factor that makes it exciting. The faster you go, the more dangerous it becomes. It is a basic equation, and evolution only makes it worse, as the humans do not change in the equation and cars go faster and faster. But then you add basic safety measures like crash helmets, roll bars or seat belts to reduce the danger factor. Like in almost all things in life, there is a point of compromise where everything works, but today safety is paramount, but I think that it is slowly destroying the sport, as the danger factor is missing more and more on all aspects. Now we are even lucky if we have a race in the rain and not by lack of water coming from the skies, but by safety, fear, or whatever. I grew up watching on Sunday afternoons a bunch of lunatics showing the weight of their big balls racing fast and dangerous cars on narrow and crazy courses. Just like the old airplane fighters, these guys were true heroes in my book. By doing their job, they risked their life at all moments. To me, a hero is someone who risks his life to help or save others, or who risks his life while doing his job. Today, F1 is so safe that you have to be involved in a freak accident to get hurt. Since the early 80s that we got used to Formula 1 cars being more or less safe with the introduction of carbon fiber. There used to be crazy crashes on the first corner, and they were even crazier on the rain when they could not see a thing, not even their own rev counter, let alone the cars in front. Pit lanes had no speed limits, and tracks were not contaminated with advertisement boards everywhere. Cars were still mainly mechanical machines with very little electronics involved, and were basically killing machines. Formula 1 cars had cameras installed at the level of the driver's helmet, and the circuits were narrower and had grass or sand traps next to the racetrack. A mistake meant you were out of the race. They were playing no games back then. TV coverage was really bad when compared to nowadays, but racing was a very serious business. The sense of speed was amazing. This seems to be reversed these days, but we loved it. It was really exciting. Welcome to this video. It is a long video and you have timestamps in the description, so you can jump to any section whenever you want. This is going to be a controversial video, and I am not expecting everybody to agree with me, especially the younger generation that grew up with different times and values. But hey, if you are going to dislike this video, do it properly, do it with rage, and do it twice. Let's begin. The best way for my words to have some kind of sense, especially for the younger guys, is to start with this small bit of a 1975 F1 documentary. Without it here, I may sound like a complete lunatic. This was the F1 I met when I was a very young boy. It was super exciting and very, very dangerous. But the driver could still make the difference.
These cars, they are cars, may be the fastest road-going machines in the world. They'll never take anybody anywhere. They'll never go from one place to another. They'll just travel around in tight little circles. Racetracks in Europe, America, all over the world. There are maybe 50 men in the world, maybe not that many, who can drive cars like these as fast and as well as they can be driven. When these men get together to find out which of them is fastest, the event is called a Grand Prix race. Grand Prix, Grand Prize. An event in the World Championship for drivers. The race itself lasts, 2 hours. The event, though, covers 3 days. Now, the first day, the cars and the drivers arrive and begin to practice. The second day, practice becomes more intense. The third day, the race is held. Simple enough, 3 days, one by one. Except that on any one of these days, whenever a man gets into one of these machines, something can go wrong. Even the best driver's concentration can slip just for a second. Or, what's more likely, any one of 100 parts on this machine can break or foul. So these 3 days go by like the best circus or the loudest spectacle ever. And then, suddenly, in a moment no one could foretell, but everyone knew was possible, a car gets into trouble, and a man is cracked like a nut or burned to death in seconds. After this happens, the drivers go on practicing or racing until the contest is over and there's a winner. And then they go on to another race. But during those 3 days, the human capacity for excellence, for ingenuity, for callousness, for vulgarity, for sheer noise, for waste, for daring, for beauty. Those capacities are stretched about as far as they can go, outside of war.
Right. Formula One is a very different sport nowadays. These are the 10 things I really miss in its modern version. Note that this list is in no particular order. 1. The madness of it all. Thanks to Mr. Bernie Ecclestone, I grew up with Formula One on my TV on Sunday afternoons at lunchtime, just like many European people. So one got used to Nelson Piquet, my first hero, Villeneuve, Lafitte, and all those guys from back then. And we started to admire them and their guts. TV transmission was really archaic, but that's what we had in those days. And we didn't need more at the time. TVs were also not great back then. It used to be true madness. It was like a crazy circus traveling across the world. There were many more teams competing, therefore lots of unknown drivers and also more opportunities to enter the business and the sport, on all levels. Drivers were also not expecting penalties by the stewards at random like today, so they raced much more freely. Well, to a certain extent, as they were risking their lives. Cars were really dangerous, but there were a lot of big crashes and there were no speed limits at all. The drivers were fearless, just like old airplane drivers, driving dangerous machines and difficult to drive in narrow and dangerous places at high speed, and it was amazing to watch. Life was so much simpler back then. You just have to look at the footage from those years. And no social media meant drivers still had a personal life. But by risking their life every single time they entered in those cars, that meant that most of them lived life to a full level. They were considered completely crazy people, and we admired them because of that. They would do what we did not want to do or could not do, and it was super exciting, like watching a dogfight in a war battle, when nowadays it looks more like watching an athletics competition. And this danger factor was the main factor of excitement of Formula One until 25 years ago. When Senna died, everything changed. Slowly and progressively, it started to fade until what we have today, a completely artificial sport with some rules that make absolutely no sense, like mandatory pit stops, etc. But more on this later. Death was always near, and that meant new opportunities for upcoming drivers and talents. Now, drivers start young and stay until they are almost 50, so it is becoming more and more an elitist sport. Note that it always has been, but nowadays it is reaching a point of being absurd. We have F2 champions without a seat in F1 for consecutive years now. Look, I don't want or like to watch drivers die while racing. I watched live my hero Senna crashing and dying in 1994, and I don't want a repeat of that. But hey, there is a special thrill to defy death while racing and crossing the finish line alive, and you, a simple fan, you can feel it. Death is part of life, and it has always been a part of motor racing. When it becomes a complete strange thing in F1, it means something is not right. Are you expecting to be in a dogfight and not fear death? But as soon as it starts, you forget about it and you accept it as part of the game. Maybe I am getting old and not following the current trends, especially woke trends. But when races are delayed for hours because of rain, or go for 2 laps under a safety car and are called a race, definitely something is terribly wrong. I would prefer a 10-lap crazy race in the rain with drivers racing at 80 km per hour on the limit of adhesion and grip than 2 laps under a safety car. After all, being this F1, it is an insult to the great drivers of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s that drove in the rain without a carbon fiber tube, halo, radio on the helmet, telemetry, or advanced electronic systems, etc. Drivers were crazy, but they did speak out freely, sounding like humans and not like robots, as we hear every day on any interview. Most of them were not marketing machines. They were not politically correct, and it was so much more exciting to listen to them, as you never knew what was coming next. Just remember, we had Piquet doing interviews.
The English interpretation is the brain fights the right foot. The right foot wants to push the accelerator down, but the brain...
It's not being the brains, it's your ass.
Now that was the problem. He's always had his brain in his ass.
And although he said a lot of shit, he also said some great truths that many did not have the balls to say. In that sense, I am glad we have Verstappen out there.
Like I said in the beginning of this press conference, I got really tired of all the questions, so yeah. I think if I get a few more, I'll headbutt someone.
In conclusion, almost everything in F1 was crazy, dangerous and deadly. And it was really exciting to watch and follow. Again, you really never knew what was coming next. Nowadays, life is mostly digital. It is very different, and it goes way too fast. F1 cars are completely run by electronics, and mechanical elements are missing more and more. Therefore, the driver element is becoming less and less important. I honestly think that too much electronics make the cars faster, but it also makes the drivers to be robots. Driving to Survive appeared.
You fucking look like rock stars, and now we are a fucking bunch of wankers.
And created a new wave of fans, but with a completely different mentality. And YouTube channels. all repeating themselves, clickbaiting, and all saying the same. I feel that young and new fans are simply happy following the latest Lando Norris reaction to a video or those kind of basic and vulgar things, so far from the danger factor from yesterday that excited the older racing fans. If you are still here, I think you are enjoying this, so please give it a like. You know, I am doing my best here, because
if you do not thrive to be the best, if you do not push yourself to be the greatest, you will accomplish nothing. How badly do you want it? How badly do you want it?
2. Checkered flag on track. I truly miss this. It was not only an exercise of style, but also something that was exciting to watch. I know I am saying this too many times, but F1 today is so sterile. Nowadays, in most of the races, you can't even see the checkered flag in the middle of so many advertisement boards. It simply disappears out there. And they are now on the second floor doing it, so not much excitement in my view. I know some smart guy is going to comment about the danger of the official waving the flag on the track. To those guys, I simply ask, can you remember any kind of accident with a checkered flag guy on track? Ever? I can't, but I also do not own the absolute truth. So if anyone knows, please let us all know in the comments section. I really like to learn new stuff. There was a time when races started with a bang. Literally. Or they waved a flag. And it didn't work very well, I think. It was done very differently by different people. Start lights are the perfect solution, but the checkered flag, it should be done on track. As a tribute to motor racing and Grand Prix history. Sometimes there are mistakes and they forget to wave the flag or they do it to the wrong car or whatever. That's human. What I miss are the iconic pictures we always had for the finish of a Grand Prix race. Each country had a different style and it was great to watch. 3. Privateers. Private teams, rented cars, sister cars. Another great thing that disappeared long time ago. Can you imagine Red Bull, Alpine, Mercedes and or Ferrari selling one or two cars each to private teams that would run them with different liveries and sponsors and would occasionally beat the main team and win a race? Well, that happened in the old days. Again, not only that would create new teams, drivers and potentially new winners, but that would also improve the sport in general and provide new opportunities for newcomers in all levels, from mechanics to drivers. I am not in favor of sister teams like Red Bull AlphaTauri because that distorts the competition. You have to be really naive to think that AlphaTauri is a team that would fight Red Bull. In reality, Red Bull, unlike all other teams, only has to fight against 8 teams and not 9. They are there to promote new drivers, but mainly not to fight the main team when their drivers are behind the sister team cars. Honestly, I would prefer to have AlphaTauri run Red Bull cars with different livery and being completely private and independent, fighting the main team like any other. If you replicate this, you would have a much better grid with many more cars and drivers, and a much better sport and competition. Main teams will always have the edge. Obviously, they own the technology and its development, but this option provides much better racing in my opinion. 4. Basic cars, mainly mechanic. Times are changing fast. Very fast. To me, and looking at the current times we live in, I think F1 should be an elitist sport, where brands would show their best technologies from the past century. Did you ever stop a minute to think about classic cars? I mean F1 classic cars. With the current technology, where you need an army of people and special machinery to run just one of the current F1 cars, how are we going to have classic cars in the future? Will they end in 2013? Yes, because after that year, you need a true army to be able to run just one car. Unlike old classic F1 cars that you can still see competing out there today and being run by 4 or 5 guys, sometimes even less than that. I heard one day one sentence that reverberated in my brain. Evolution is great, but maybe it has went too far. Well, I believe it applies to F1. I think technology, but mainly electronics, is killing the sport, just like the usage of too many digital systems. To me, the perfect formula is very simple. Drivers should be drivers and not robots, so cars would have a normal round steering wheel, a manual gearbox, where missing a gear change would mean to pay a price, probably being overtaken, and a V12 with a turbo or not. A simple high-revving engine that could be run with biological fuels, where brands would show all their technologies and advancements. I think we live in an electric era, alright, but we should not be radical on this. With the current inflation and energy prices spiking, many electric car owners see now the dark side of things. If everything today was suddenly electrical, well, it wouldn't work. We don't have enough energy creation systems to support it. I think that electric should be left to Formula E and F1 should be different and more elitist, as it likes to be seen. By using biofuels, it could keep using a simple internal combustion engine. Cars should be cheaper with simple flowing lines. They are too complicated and expensive, and there is no need for that. Remember that power-wise, F1 cars were very, very different to those on the streets, but that is not true today. Today, you can find cars on the street that are more powerful than the current F1 cars. I am not saying that they are faster or whatever, but just stating a fact. In the old days, F1 drivers drove cars completely different than the public had available, and that's why they were treated like heroes. They were driving and controlling super machines that other humans could not get. 5. First lap crashes. I did grow up watching crashes in almost all first laps. Drivers had spare cars, and they really made use of it. There were a lot of crashes, especially in the first lap, and that is very crazy when you think about the danger, lots of cars together, all full of fuel and being driven by a crazy man. Nowadays, there is almost no sport. There is a business, and God forbid to crash, let alone in the first lap. The yearly budget is tight and cars are expensive to build and to run, so these first lap crashes are truly a thing of the past. But I miss them. They would delay the races sometimes, but there was always great crashes to watch on Sundays for sure. Even if the race was boring, a good crash was almost certain on the cards.
Viewers, apologize, I'm continue.
6. No pit lane speed limit. This was really, really crazy, and it provided for a great spectacle as the pit lanes were sometimes packed with people everywhere, but sometimes there were some crashes with consequences for the mechanics. But, believe it or not, I find this number really low when you think about it. Crazy drivers, driving dangerous cars in a narrow road full of people everywhere. It's a recipe for disaster, but it rarely happened. Again, it was crazy, very dangerous, but amazing to see. Remember that Senna did the best lap time in Donington 1993 race by using the pit lane without speed limiter. That full story is in this video, link in the description. 7. Cameras on the helmet level. As I mentioned before, I grew up watching crazy drivers displaying their big balls and skills on the steering wheel, always risking their lives. Unfortunately, as history goes on and evolution happens, we simply lost the footage of the best old drivers and their performances, as there were no possibilities of shooting onboard footage on film continually during the races. Technology would not allow it. Today, you have onboard footage from all angles and sides, and the drivers are tremendous athletes, but they are racing in tanks compared to the dangerous 70s F1 cars. They are protected well on all sides. Unfortunately, we cannot see the footage from onboard in the 1930s, when drivers were driving cars with almost the same power than today, but with bicycle tires. No crash helmets, no roll bars, no seat belts, and on roads surrounded by trees, telegraph posts, huge drops, etc. Those were true heroes, and we cannot truly appreciate them with onboard footage. 100 years ago, Tazio Nuvolari drove and won the Italian Grand Prix in motorcycles with both legs broken and unplastered after a crash in practice, and needed 2 mechanics to hold him in the start and to stop him on the arrival. Some years later, and talking about cars, he fooled the doctors, escaped the hospital and took a taxi to the circuit, where he raced in the spare car and finished 7th with a broken leg, so driving with one leg only for the 3 pedals he had. In the 1960s, when Jackie Stewart started his safety campaign, the 1930s racing driver Louis Chiron stated that, and I quote, "Modern drivers don't know how to die." Well, I wouldn't go that far, but in reality, compared to these old drivers, modern drivers are true pussies. Yes, that's the word we use here in Porto when we want to be harsh. They have it easier than any other F1 driver from the past. They are rock stars, true prima donnas, always complaining about everything, and nowadays they seem to fear everything. You just have to listen to them when they see a vintage F1 car. I don't want to be offending anyone here, but the modern driver's attitude is so diametrically different than the one old drivers had, and it is painful to see sometimes. I confess that there are times when I think to myself that they should be racing online for a living instead. Sometimes this looks like a Monty Python sketch. By this rate, someday an F1 driver will be caught saying,
I'd like to leave the army, please, sir. Good heavens, man, why? It's dangerous.
In the 80s and 90s, when onboard video technology first appeared, they were mounted by the side of the helmet, and we could finally appreciate the danger and their guts. With the modern angles they offer you, everything is made for TV, and with the wide tracks they race on today, well, there is not much excitement there, or sense of speed, or danger. Just compare onboard footage from a narrow track like Suzuka with an onboard shot on Bahrain, for example. 8. Old-style narrow high-speed circuits with fast corners. In the last 30 years, one by one, old trucks were permanently changed. Some more, some less. F1 used to be a race run in high-speed tracks, but now medium-speed corners are the preferred choice for circuit designers and lawmakers. Modern circuits have absolutely no charisma or class. They seem all the same. If you take a look at the circuits in the 1950s or 60s, even in the 70s, you will find out that it all seems coming from another world or a comic book. They were racing either in the nature or in the streets of places like Monte Carlo. What about today? They are racing in between advertisement boards. There is an excess of those on modern trucks, and with Liberty Media, it seems that it will only go worse and worse. Drivers almost have no references for braking or anything. It used to be grass on the sides of the truck punishing mistakes, and it seems that after a decade of tarmac and abuses of track limits with no end, and after a lot of pressure by the fans, they found out that it was not working, and they are slowly returning to a more natural racetrack, being Spa the best example of this. A trend to repeat, please. 9. Less or no electronics. In my view, electronics slowly kill the sport and are, alongside sponsorship, both a blessing and a cancer. I know perfectly that F1 is the pinnacle of the sport, as they like to call it, and the state-of-the-art of car technology, and if in one hand it promotes development and progress, on the other hand it ended with the mastery of driving, where all drivers can see and analyze the telemetry of all others and copy it. A long time ago they promoted F1 and car racing in general as a show of the latest advancements of car technology that we users would have in our cars in the following years. It was progress in front of our eyes. Well, that time is long gone. From the late 70s that it was over as F1 went into aerodynamics as its fundamental technology, and it had very little or no connections at all with the car industry. So, from 40 years now that F1 does not improve at all the car technology, and it disconnected itself from the industry almost completely. Producing carbon fiber cars in mass numbers was only achieved recently and with many limitations, as a small example of this point. F1 has always been elitist, and I completely hate when it forgets all Grand Prix history that preceded it, and sometimes parts of itself. F1 is nothing more than an evolution of the old Grand Prix races that were held since cars were invented. Well, since 1906, when the first Grand Prix was held in France, at least. In 1950, it changed its name and did it 2 or 3 times, but still had rules like before stating what could be done and what could be not. Once I watched an interview with both Max and Jos Verstappen, and they agreed that the best era in F1 was the mid-70s. When a driver still could make the difference. There were no electronics at all in the sport, and if you were 1 second behind your rival in practice, you had to find it out on the track, and not in the telemetry. Well, let's be honest here. Timing, being electronic and digital, is great, as it will avoid trickeries with it. But apart from the timing, I would remove all electronics and fire all those engineers that are always telling the drivers what to do and how to drive the car. It sounds so artificial and fake when they do it. Cars should be simple and drivers should do the racing. And that's it. Why do we need teams with so many employees? Nowadays, even with the cost cap, they are huge, and they have tons of guys just looking at numbers in a computer monitor. Simulations and simulators, blah 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 blah. I miss when things were so much simpler.
Nice guys finish last.
10. Less safety concerns and less stupid rules. I read once in a YouTube comment that we live in a nanny era. I agree. There are too many safety concerns. This is motor racing and it has always been dangerous. That is not going to change. If you don't like it and you want it safe, you have computers, PlayStations, and internet gaming. Even Sterling Moss and Jackie Stewart said that it has gone too far. Without any danger like it is today, unless there is a freak accident with very few probabilities, it is not fun or exciting. And with safety cars and interruptions all the time, no racing in the rain, etc., it is slowly dying in my view. Safety car should not be for everything. If there are sectors and timing beams, the affected sector would be run on pit lane speed limit. And if they are too fast there, they would be penalized instantly, just like the speed lane penalization. If cars are running at 80 or less kilometers per hour, I think it is safe to work, as the cars can stop very fast at that speed. I think it is an easy fix. Remember, safety car was originally called the pace car. Even that changed. In the old days, drivers would race with little or no information, bad or no radio connections, and they were not expecting penalties unless they went crazy or on purpose. Basic stuff in my book. Nowadays, teams seem to do the racing sometimes. Other times, they seem to destroy their drivers' races. Yes, Ferrari, that was for you. I believe in balanced proportions, but not as it is nowadays in F1. It always has been a sport and a business, and both were always in. But today, it is much more a business than a sport. It should be the opposite, at best. George Russell left his car in Silverstone to help another fellow driver. By doing that, he was penalized and not allowed to race anymore. This is absolutely ridiculous. A guy has a sportive act and is penalized by that. What a joke. It seems that now they opened an exception for this, but it is not very clear in my book. Most important, teams should not be messing with the rules. Can you imagine football teams interfering with the rules? The richer teams would take advantage and make the rules favorable to them, obviously. That's what is happening with F1. For instance, they absolutely should not interfere with new teams coming to the sport. If anyone complies with the rules, they should be allowed in. Otherwise, is this a sport, after all? And there are too many stupid rules out there that do not help the sport in any way. No tires crossing. I mean, mixing soft tires in the left side or in the front axle with mediums on the other one. Mandatory pit stop. I mean, why can't a driver drive an entire race without changing tires like they used to do before? Allowing changing tires in red flag situations, etc. And it seems that now they want to end the races in the rain, or end the wet tires. Well, maybe I am wrong. After Suzuka, maybe they learned something. The perfect formula. Since Bernie Ecclestone took over F1, lots of stuff disappeared, while new technologies appeared. Sometimes from nowhere, from the end of privateers to the arrival of electronics or carbon fiber. Lots of things changed. Now, with Liberty Media, it is getting worse and worse. Honestly, in a perfect world and in a romantic way, to me, the perfect F1 would have the drivers doing the racing. No telemetry, no radios, no computers, no strategists, no helpers. There would be small teams, small budgets, and hardworking people. Small teams would reunite with big manufacturers that would provide the engines, and both would build a strong team. And the championship would have 3 races that would be completely different. For instance, 1. A really fast one like Monza being run with no chicanes, just like an European Indianapolis. 2. Monaco race being contested with old vintage 1930 Bugatti cars that are still handmade in Argentina from the original designs and molds. And 3. One final third race being run as an endurance race like the early Grand Prix races. I don't know. Silverstone as an example, being run for 800 kilometers. These races would be double points for the championship and only these would be different. I think that it would be a perfect tribute to F1 and Grand Prix history. Conclusion. Now, with so many big manufacturers in F1 as the main team, and with the state of the business, if one, or God forbid, 2, decide to leave, what is the future for F1? Are we returning to the 70s with one manufacturer providing the engine for 90% of the grid and fighting Ferrari? But to which teams? There are no independent teams anymore. Sometimes I do not see a great future there, but I may be completely wrong. What do you think? Am I crazy? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments section. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, share it with your friends, leave a line in the comments section if you have something to say or ask, and subscribe for more videos like this. I see you in the next video. Take care.